The biggest fear most people have when using an OLED monitor as their primary display is the ever-dreaded burn-in effect. For those that don't know, burn-in is when the microscopic LEDs that make up an organic light-emitting display end up showing the same thing on screen for a long enough time, say the Windows taskbar or a game's HUD, for example. The LEDs wear down such that no matter what they're showing, they have the silhouette of the burned-in content. It's one of the biggest drawbacks when it comes to an OLED panel, and it's something that people are somewhat rightfully afraid of when it comes to using an OLED, especially for your primary display. But actually, are you right to be afraid? Is burn-in a problem you're actually likely to experience with an OLED gaming monitor? Well, as with everything in life, it depends. For some panels, especially from my testing, the LG qd-oled panels, like in the Aorus FO48U, even with relatively low powered on hour counts, it had pretty significant burn-in. With any sort of full screen non-black color, it was clear that the taskbar had burned into the panel. In fact, even some file icons from the desktop had burned in, which, considering it only had been on for just 280 hours when I got it, that's not great. The good news was that, at least for that specific panel, it hadn't run its wear leveling function basically that entire time, meaning once it did run the function, it pretty much looked as good as new. I think this is a good time to talk about the various protections that monitor manufacturers have baked into these displays to keep the burn-in at bay. The one that I've already mentioned, the sort of pixel refresher, is a kind of little wear leveling function that essentially refreshes the panel, but equally cuts down the lifespan of all of the pixels. Seeing as all of these monitors are still pretty new, it's kind of hard to know exactly how long they'll last with, regular conventional usage. But seeing as the Philips offers a 3-year warranty on the Evnia 8600 that I've been using daily, I'd expect it to last at least that long, and likely a fair bit more too. There's normally two different types of that pixel refresher as well. The one that runs generally daily, and the one that runs after 1,000, 1,500, or in my case 2,000 hours, depending on the panel and type and the manufacturer's choice. The former is a very light pass, just a touch-up to help ensure that burn-in doesn't start, let alone dig its heels in. The latter, often called a panel refresh rather than pixel refresh, is a more invasive pass. It takes a lot longer, an hour or two rather than like 5 to 10 minutes, and is the one that takes a decent chunk of lifespan out of the pixels. Although it is worth mentioning that since this only runs, at least in my case, after 83 days of panel usage time, not just lifespan but actual panel on time, even if you work from home and use the panel every day for 12 hours a day, it's only going to do that panel refresh twice a year. And for more conservative usage, like 4 hours a day, every day a year, it won't do it for over a year. It'll do it less than once a year. For that Aorus FO48U that I mentioned, that's all of the user controllable features, just the 2 refresh modes. Although the Evnia that I use does actually have a couple more. Screensaver is basically a brightness dimmer that after something like 5 or so minutes of inactivity, if no pixel changes color for something like 5 minutes, the panel dims itself. It's still perfectly visible if you are, reading something on the panel, and you can also, bring it back to your sort of set brightness level by just moving your mouse a bit, but it helps extend the lifespan of the panel. There's also the pixel orbiting mode. Basically, it shifts the whole frame up, down, left and right by 1 or 2 pixels each way, every few minutes or hours depending on the setting you pick. There are also a few non-user controllable settings, like the adaptive brightness limiters that you'll most prominently find on the qd-oled panels. these, if done badly, can be distracting by basically allowing for a peak brightness value for a really short period of time and then ramping that brightness back down a fairly considerable amount. This was really obvious on the FO48U, where in a small window the white background of YouTube was remarkably bright, but at full screen it was incredibly dim, and you could open and close the window and you would notice that dimming happening before your very eyes. My open source response time tool captured it really well. You can see how it peaks at one value and then slowly tapers back down to a lower level. That's the ABL doing its thing. I think it's also worth noting that, at least from my admittedly limited experience, the qd-oled monitors that I've had in have been a little better on the burn-in front. The EVNIA 8600 that I've been using as my primary display for a good couple months now has zero visible burn-in, and I use it all day, every day. If I had to guess, it's probably on between 10 and 12 hours a day, and still there's no issues here. Picking a qd-oled generally also avoids the pixel layout issues that you can run into, especially with the w-oled panels, as qd-oleds generally use a pretty standard RGB pixel layout, whereas w-oleds use wRGB or rwgb, things like that, which can make text look blurry, smeared, and just generally difficult to read and not a very pleasing experience. The only downside is that the qd-oled panels generally only seem to come as either TVs or in ultra-wide resolutions like my EVNIA. So if you're looking for a regular 16:9 panel, you'll generally only find w-oleds, at least right now. But back to the topic of burn-in, it's worth noting that you do kind of have to baby these things if you want them to last. I have Windows turn my displays off after 3 minutes. Partially for the OLED and partially as a bit of a hack for ADHD, plus I keep the panel at a relatively low brightness at 60%, as I've set up my displays so that they aren't in direct sunlight and therefore can be a lot dimmer than you might otherwise need. It does the pixel refresh every night, and I've got the screensaver on fast and pixel orbiting on normal because neither of them bother me that much and they should help extend the useful lifespan of this thing. It is kind of a shame that something that's this relatively expensive is so fragile and needs to be babied to eke out the most life from it. But that is the joy of getting in still relatively early. It is worth noting that there's a very good chance that your phone uses an OLED panel, and save for a few edge cases, like the iPhone 15 Pro or whichever one it was, where burn-in does creep in, the vast majority of panels don't have any burn-in at all and lead plentiful lives, with things like the battery failing long before the display does. So, can you use an OLED as your primary display? Definitely. Is it going to last quite as long as an LCD equivalent? Well, probably not, but I doubt that it would be a significant difference, and during that time you'll get a phenomenal experience. Instant response times, infinite contrast ratios, and often vibrant colours to boot. It's an amazing experience, and I'm incredibly happy to have one as my main display. If you are interested in picking one up, I'll leave a link to the EVNIA that I use in the description, and of course I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. What do you think about using an OLED as your primary display? Is it still a bit sort of too early for you and you're still worried about burn-in? Or are you sort of convinced and maybe you just can't afford one? Or is it something you actively want or have? Let me know in the comments down below. If you are interested, you can hit the subscribe button to see more videos like this one, more monitor reviews, laptops and things like this, and a load of other gaming related hardware, and of course hit the bell notification icon. There's also plenty of other videos on the end cards you can check out, and if you want to be able to test things like OLEDs, I do make my own hardware and the open source response time tool and open source latency testing tool, which you can pick up at osrtt.com. Otherwise, thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed it, we'll see you on the next video.